Put me in. No, I almost forgot to put me in. All right, campers. Here's the problem. And I got Froggy right here on the phone. So, Froggy, let's say hello. All right.
Hello, and can you hear me?
All right, campers, give me a thumbs up or 5x5 if you're Froggy on the phone. See if there's a delay in that. And I'm bringing the system volume up.
1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello.
Please identify yourself for the record, sir. Are you Dr. Phrog?
Yeah, what am I supposed to do? Ribbit 3 times?
No, man, that's you. All right, so tell us what happened, campers. Can we hear it? Go ahead. Say. So what's going on? Yes, Davey gave me a 5-5. Whimsical gave me a peace sign. And who is Frog? All right. So,
yeah, who's Frog? That's a good question, and actually, I prefer to remain anonymous.
Yeah, exactly. So I should probably shrink me out so they don't know what I look like either. So we've got a great picture of me, and I was set up, man. I washed my shower, hair, shave, unbelievable. All right, so I don't really want to do this full-blown thing with you here in this mode.
Let's see how it goes. Yeah, let's see how it goes. And if people feel like they're getting that they're hearing us, then we'll go forward. If they don't feel like they're hearing us, then we can truncate it. Sure.
Okay. Prosperity now says sound is okay. Cheryl Callahan in Massachusetts is 5x5. All right, it's good. Okay, well, I'm just going to remind everybody for my long-term viewers, because I've got a lot of new ones. Well, way back when I interviewed Webb, and we did, what do we call it? Ghetto TV or Farmer TV. And I had him do a Facebook or a FaceTime call onto an iPad. I had the iPad on the table, and I had my camera taking a picture of him and his talking head on the iPad, and his audio was coming through my mic. This is one step away because we don't have visuals on Froggy. All right, Froggy. So how the hell have you been? I haven't talked to you in months. What's new?
Well, I've been extremely busy the last 3-4 months, and I've basically gotten off my own channel, which for anybody who doesn't know is called Seething Frog.
Right, Seething Frog.
And I am going to do something in the next few days on Seething Frog, but of course that means having all of my equipment working, and part of the reason that I'm not on video today is that I've loaded a bunch of stuff up and packed to move, and of course, as I just told you, Jonesy, the Mr. Farmer, I have a pickup loaded to the gills with stuff, and suddenly discover that my Logitech camera and some cables are probably in one of the 72 boxes in the back of the pickup. So
you've got your computer, but no mic and no camera, is what you're saying.
Well, I have my big camera, which is the one I always do the videos, but I don't have the little Logitech camera that works for these stream live deals. So,
good. All right. Well, we're going to
talk about, at least in part, we're going to talk about Seattle and about the implications of it and the orders that have already been given, and what you and I see as the countervailing potential going the other way, and perhaps some of our frustrations with the whole legal profession because they're such a pile of dog crap is the truth of it.
Come on, don't sugarcoat it. So here's hang on, Greg. Here's the deal, and they know I'm Alex, so we can be on a first name basis here.
All right. Okay.
So what we've got is a couple of things. I sent you the order and the motion for the TRO. I don't know that I want to go into that, but in the show notes right here while they're up live, there is the link to the ACLU page, which is essentially the docket of all documents there. So that's for all of our viewers, and you can grab this too, Greg, later. Now, we're on the backup channel here. So that's that. And the people here, I think I've got 1,700 now, so this is cool. So they got a TRO, Black Lives Matter, went into court, represented by who? Perkins Coie, the same people that represented Hillary and arguably did the money transfers to Steele and his Steele dossier. And what was the other one there? Glenn Simpson and his, I forgot the name of that operation. that hired Steele. So they come in and they got a TRO against the Seattle City Police Department from using tear gas. Okay. And ACLU joined them in that application. Now, you read the whole thing this morning that I sent you, and I read through the order. And, if you want to go into that, I'd rather not waste this time.
No, but let's do a couple minutes. Let's just do a couple minutes.
Okay.
Because it actually bifurcates. It splits out. I mean, the early Black Lives Matter protests were allegedly peaceful.
Right.
And the question then is, what happened in those so-called peaceful protests? And the court, at least on the early edge of it, said, it was largely peaceful except for a few minor property damage things. And the problem was, and this is a legitimate problem, I mean, people tend to say, well, it's all Black Lives Matter, or it's all the police. And the answer is no, it's both. But what the police did with the protests is that instead of going after the guys that were throwing bricks into windows and tipping stuff over and breaking things, they went after the entire crowd, and they rubber bulleted, they pepper sprayed passive protesters that were standing near the edge of their boundary where they were supposed to do. They threw
the flashbang
grenades,
right?
Flashbang grenades and some other stuff, and then they tear gassed people, and they tear gassed people who were allegedly, not threatening anybody. So what the court said, and let's just spend the next minute on that, and then we'll be done, is that you've got a First Amendment right to assembly and free speech and to protest, and those are basic rights, and they can be offset if people are doing dangerous things or violating health, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But what the court ended up saying was that these largely peaceful protests were being overly managed, more hostile and hurtfully managed, with all of this random tear gas and pepper spray and the rest of that, and that there was no justification, that it was overreactive to the process. And then the Fourth Amendment comes in, and it is that effectively that you cannot use more force than you need to use, that you are not supposed to be using obsessive or excessive force. And basically what the court said was, for peaceful protesters, you can't just randomly tear gas them.
Right.
And the reasonable part of the order says this is a limited prohibition, and it does not apply to serious damage to property or to people. So,
right.
So here's the bifurcation. It makes it look like police have to step away and basically give these guys CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, because the police overreacted. And that's not the nature of the order at all. The nature of the order is, if you just have peaceful protesters exerting their First Amendment rights, you cannot shoot them with rubber bullets or spray them to get them to disperse unless they are threatening officers or citizens or doing serious harm to property.
Right.
And or so it's kind of like, is it black or is it white? I mean, if you're excessive, does that mean that once you get an order in, you do nothing forever, right?
Well, hold on. It's a TRO, so it's temporary for 14 days. Right. Now, just so you're aware, on the screen, I split the screen and I made it full screen. I have the document of the actual order here. Okay. Now, this is what we're talking about, where he's talking about chemical irritants, right? Batons, kinetic impact projectiles, and weapons intended to stun with light sound. There's two problems I have, and I agree with what you're saying. He did not stop the police from using tear gas or non-lethal force against rioters and mayhem makers. But there's a couple of interesting problems. And as I said to you before our call, this is based on the judge or the court reading the record and what he says, and he cites numerous exhibits and videos. Now, we know that BLM and Antifa are a very organized group, and they had plenty of videos making them look like the victims. We're just minding our own business, and here's what happens. the city, presumably the city attorney or whoever was opposing the motion, did not have readily available video clips of violence, people smashing windows, burning cars, lighting fires to buildings, etc. So that probably got overlooked because it wasn't introduced in the record. The court does say the record is very sparse at this beginning phase of the proceedings, right? So that's the first point. The second point is, at the very end, and this is something I didn't mention, he waives, and I'm trying to get this damn thing to slide. I'm going to whip it down at the end, right? That's ordered. So he waives the security bond, which I find amazing. So that means our peaceful protest turns into a riot, wrecks half the city, and who's paying for it? That's the purpose of the bond, isn't it?
Well, what I took the judge to be saying, and I did a double take on that, is, first of all, if you go in to get a temporary restraining order, let's say I go in to get one against you temporarily, because something that I allege you are going to do against me or have been doing. And the court says, well, yeah, that seems important, and we'll hold it up for 2 weeks, and we'll give Alex the opportunity to respond. But in the meantime, if the temporary restraining order we give against Alex stops him from conducting business for 2 weeks and it costs $50,000 worth of business loss, then there's a bond to cover that if we end up deciding it was not reasonable.
Correct.
What the court said here, at least, is that because the damage, if any, is public and is against the police, there is no loss because the police being restrained from something will not cost money.
All right, pause. Hold on. Number 3, because this is a non-commercial case, the balance of hardships favors plaintiffs, and there is no realistic likelihood of harm to the city of Seattle from enjoining its conduct. The court waives the security bond required.
Yep, that's it. That's exactly it. And
Right.
that's my point.
Okay.
Now, had the business owners of the
I got the point.
area
Sure.
joined in the suit and said, we see a real danger from not adequately policing these people to major damage to our property, and we add ourselves in as a co-plaintiff, then the court would have been perfectly legitimately justified in saying we need a $10 million bond. And as you point out, and this is crazy crap, because if you're going to go against Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and they've got cameras everywhere, and you're going to tell me that you're the police department and you don't have live cameras, and you're not using the TV crews, and you're not justifying your own actions, as well as justifying the reasons for arresting certain people. I mean, if a guy throws a brick into the window now, basically everybody says, well, where's the video? Where's the video? If you're a police officer standing there and you see it, where's the video? And how does it identify the person? So, the police should have as many cameras, and all of those street corner cameras and all of the TV station cameras and anybody that would submit videos from their own phones should all be part of their record, and they should have submitted it. So
we agree. So why didn't they?
Didn't do that, the attorneys for the city are idiots. I mean, that's just a simple answer. The attorneys for them are idiots if they didn't do that.
Right. Or they intentionally, accidentally on purpose, couldn't find them.
Well, when you look at, and this is the second problem, which is since this TRO came in, the city of Seattle said, oh gosh, I guess in order for them to use their First Amendment rights, we need to concede or accede or exceed, depending on how you say it, this 10-block area or whatever it is, and we need to let them speak through that 10-block area.
Well, they've knocked it down, Greg. They went from 6 down to, or 7 down to 3. Okay, right. So now it's potentially more manageable. It's 3. But they still have armed guards for people going in there, and that's where I have the problem. And that's what we started with yesterday. So I'm sorry, but go ahead. Go ahead.
you got multiple layers of problems. I mean, first of all, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, a month ago, the city of Seattle ordered there be no assemblies. I don't know whether Seattle in particular kept people from going to church or from having weddings or funerals or whatever with more than 10 people in them. But suddenly we have tens of thousands of people in a park.
Exactly.
And we don't have 6 feet separation, and we don't have masks on. And even though they are allegedly in violation of all of these health and safety codes, nobody says, well, you guys can't have a protest if you violate the basic health code. So basically what we're saying is, and of course I've seen videos on this, we've got COVID-19 until we have George, and I call him George Pink Floyd, comes up. And when Pink Floyd shows up, then we can throw all the COVID crap out the window. And now we have Black Lives Matter and the rights of the blacks to destroy property and to beat whites up on the streets and the rest of that kind of stuff, and to take down police departments.
And shooting black police and beating black people. I mean, there's all kinds of, it's mayhem. But I made the point to you earlier, and you're kind of parlaying on it now, that the argument right here that I'm showing on the screen is the legal standard. And the people and my viewers and campers here know that when you have a fundamental right, like the First Amendment, the freedom of assembly, that the state has to show a compelling state interest as to limiting it, impinging it, and they have to do it in the least restrictive way, right? And that is called the strict scrutiny test. And in this thing, and this is hilarious, if you guys read this, and I'm talking to the campers here, right? Let me bring this in, is that the argument the judge lays out here is exactly the argument that we should have used, we the people, against the federal government and every state government that has shut down businesses, demanded that no group of more than 10 people can assemble, violating our fundamental rights, because he goes through the analysis right here. And this is the exact argument, I'd say 99% of it, of what an injunction should have been issued against states, counties, mayors, even the federal government, for God's sake.
There should have been 10,000 of these briefs filed in cities and counties and against governors,
mayors,
all over the United States.
Absolutely.
And the test is there a problem? Yes. Is the problem infringing on First Amendment rights? Yes. Does the state action involved in it warrant the kind of use that it does? Does it address the issue and only the issue? Does it direct the issue at only the people who are most impinged by it and not directed at other people whose rights will be curtailed?
Right.
Does it do it in the least offensive process? And is it absolutely essential? And is there direct knowledge and clear and unequivocal
evidence
that the measures being taken are reasonably curtailing otherwise strict scrutiny, First Amendment or Fourth Amendment or Second Amendment rights that could not otherwise be curtailed? And the answer is none of the above.
Right.
None of the above. And not only that, and as you and I have discussed, and this is kind of a segue to the whole Seattle process, but if you flip it, if we're going to have 6 foot distancing and that's going to be mandated, is there any evidence at all that it does anything? And the answer is no. There's absolutely no evidence. Is there any evidence that wearing masks, none of which, including the N95 masks, which go down below 1 micron, will curtail viruses? And the answer is no.
Exactly.
Does the mask cause problems and offset problems? And are there exclusions for wearing masks which reasonably take into account other people's right to breathe, which is kind of a fundamental right?
Yeah.
Which, because it goes directly to life, liberty, and the potential to survive.
Right.
And there's nothing in there about the exceptions for it anywhere. Does the assembly problem work? No, of course not. Did the church limitations? Of course not. The stopping businesses, was that the least curtailing, least opportunity, limitation?
Right. The least infringing. That's the word. Right.
Right. Exactly. Potential. And the second part of it is, can you demonstrate that closing the businesses down, businesses that you did close down, has an impact on the health problem that you're addressing? And that answer is no. And not only that, because we have essential and non-essential businesses, the government has basically said that essential businesses show that nobody should be curtailed, because we let those go on anyway.
Right. Well, let me stop you there. We've wandered into another angle, which is the whole due process, the taking without due process. They've shut down people's businesses. So if you break it, you're paying, right? What was that? The Pottery Barn cited by Colin Powell. You go into Iraq, you break it, you own it. Well, guess what? You just wrecked my business. You put me out of business by arbitrarily declaring me an unessential business. And guess what? You now own it, and I want the fair market value at the day before you shut me down. Okay, not today.
If you have a taking by the government,
right,
where you take what the Constitution requires is that you cannot take a person's property, a private person's property, without due process,
without compensation. It's like an eminent domain claim.
And so if you're going to put a highway in through a guy's 100 acres, then you have to pay him not only the reasonable value of the 10 acres you're going to take out of the 100 acres, but the diminution of the 90 acres that you don't take.
There you go.
So if the highway going through takes up, $100,000 for the 10 acres, that's part of it. But if it decreases the other 90 acres by 50%, then you have to pay for that too.
Exactly. I let me stop, because don't forget, I'm looking at the screens here. All right, viewers, first, can you hear Dr.Phrog okay? And can you see why he and I could get into these like real kind of brain surgery dialogues? It's great stuff. And this is why I love Froggy, because he makes the point. Not only do you have to be paid for the 10 acres out of your 100 where they're going to put the road, but they have to pay you for the diminution, the reduction in value of the other 90 acres, because that 10 is gone. So how do you calculate damages? That's the point he's making here, which is why the Frogmeister is the Frogmeister. Okay, so you mentioned something yesterday about an issue you had in the department store. You want to share that with us?
Well, let me preface it by saying there are lots and lots of people, including the people on CNN and the rest of these guys, that are basically saying two things. One is we're going to get back to normal, and then they say, well, there's a new normal, and neither of those is true. I mean, the new normal is a new violation, and I got a taste of this the other day. I was in a penny store. I went to get some T-shirts and stuff. And I walked in and went in and got the stuff and got in line. And about that time, we noticed that most everybody else had masks on. And then somebody said, you're supposed to be wearing a mask to me. And I thought, well, yeah, what's the point? And we got up to the front, and the person wouldn't wait on me. Called the manager. The manager came. The manager wouldn't talk to me. I asked them whether they were going to wait on me or not. They didn't respond. I told them that I had the ADA rights, the American Disabilities Act rights.
Excellent.
Under HIPAA, not to wear a mask, and that with respiratory problems that I have, multiple respiratory problems, allergies, asthma, congestion, etc., which I don't even have to tell them, it prevents me from wearing a mask in any kind of effective way. The person wouldn't listen to me. Tried to sell the T-shirts to my partner, the friend that I was with. I said, no, it's my stuff. Still did not tell me that there was a policy. Still did not tell me that I needed to leave. Still did not tell me there was a problem until they couldn't sell us the goods. And then they said, you're being disruptive. 12 seconds later, we were out the door. And effectively, what this department store was saying is that we are absolutely, not only are we not going to serve you, we are not going to let you in the store without the mask. And there are no exceptions, even though there are federal laws that allow for the exceptions. But wait, there's more. Then
yeah, but wait, let me stop you. Let me stop you, just so everybody has a
Yeah.
proper visual. You were not wearing a mask. Everybody else
That's right.
was. And
Yes.
your girlfriend offered to say, okay, well, I'll buy them, right?
No,
The
she
stuff.
didn't. No, she didn't.
The manager
tried-
said she can buy them, but was
She can
ignoring
buy
you.
them
You didn't exist. You were Casper the Friendly Ghost, who was not even there. So the customer service level is phenomenal. How they communicate with their customers, outrageous.
Had she said, "Sir, you can't be in here. We have a policy."
Right, to you.
That would have at least notified me, because I didn't. There's a little sign. There's a little yellow sign on the indoor, along with 10 other signs and 3 huge signs going out of business and discounts. There's this little 8x10 sign in tiny print that says you got to wear a mask. And of course, even with that, Alex,
Yeah.
I should be entitled with the ADA and HIPAA to say, well, yeah, it doesn't apply to me.
Right.
You know,
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that a second, because I shared those great images of the cards, the ADA HIPAA notification to villains with the channel, and a lot of people looked at them and some modified them and found others, etc. So now what's your process? I was going to say yesterday, and I'll say it now, you should call the DOJ hotline on there and notify them of it.
But
Right?
wait, there's more. So what I did was, yesterday morning, the day after this thing, I got on to the official United States Department of Justice channel and the civil rights section, and the application, filling out a complaint, and filled out a complaint against this department store. Provided them with a complete narrative, told them exactly what happened, and was acknowledged as having filed a formal complaint.
Good.
So
now that's J.C. Penney's, and they're in bankruptcy, so they're probably exempt.
well, they're not exempt from ADA and HIPAA, nor are they exempt.
I'm talking about paying the fine.
Oh yeah, well.
Yeah.
My suspicion is that the fine supersedes, probably comes in on the front of the pile on your bankruptcy. I would be surprised if it doesn't, but I have no idea.
So what are you going to? The DOJ is going to litigate this in bankruptcy court against J.C. Penney. Pretty funny. What a fiasco! But go ahead, man. And let's hit Seattle in the next step here, please.
Well, all right. So, but here's the point, and this is an important point, and this applies to everything we've talked about, and that is, we have basic rights, we have fundamental rights, we have business rights, we have trade rights, we have commerce rights, and we have statutory federal rights, like the ones that I attempted to maintain with about the ADA, and those are all being ignored, and they're being ignored at 2 levels. One is all of these municipalities and counties and states that are playing games with demanding and proposing and fining and jailing people for violating their health code, their new and unmitigated health code requirements. And the other part of it, and this is the more important part, and it's the part that people, if they listen to this, have to pay attention to, is if you don't stand up against being confined behind a muzzle, a bra-sized muzzle, that is totally ineffective to the process and thereby violates your rights and perhaps limits you on a whole range of rights that you have and your own health. If you don't stand up for that, wait, there's going to be more. This is just a way of saying, how sheeply can we get these people to be?
I agree.
If 50% of the population will wear these stupid muzzles, and not only wear them, but there were people at the penny store that were incensed and insulted that I had dared to come into the property and not wear a mask.
Yeah,
and had I been COPD, had I had an oxygen tank behind me or a walker, would they have treated me the same way? Would they?
Who knows?
Yeah.
But they're the brown shirts, and that's what they're doing. They're creating the crowd manipulation with the panic game of the flood the message and the full spectrum dominance, and they're getting the compliance from the sheeple, right? And I mean, right in here, I'm looking, I don't know what page we're at on this stupid order. I guess we're on page 9, the balance of hardship and public interest. But again, this guy's whole argument speaks directly to the removal and the oppression of our fundamental rights. This business of what do we want to call this? House arrest on the pretense of a virus that they haven't established anything that they're ordering will prevent its spread.
Let's look at the layers of COVID-19 for a moment.
Oh God, please not. No. Let's do Seattle. Let's talk about this idiot mayor. And then we need to come back and do this so we can look at your smiling face too. After you get a shave.
Let me talk about my anger about the legal profession. You and I've talked about this briefly. So here we have a city, the city of Seattle, that has 50,000 lawyers in it. It has more. It's crawling with lawyers, and they're all wearing little suits and the rest of that. And there are probably a half dozen of them or so that live in that Capitol Hill autonomous zone.
Right.
And I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question, which is, if in fact Perkins Coie can put together a 20-page brief,
right,
90% of which is boilerplate,
right,
protecting the rights of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa folks, where is that brave lawyer, brave law firm that protects the rights of people whose houses are being entered, where the Black Lives Matter terrorist gangs are going from door to door, where stores are being destroyed, where people are being beaten in the street?
Right.
And where is the restraining order against Black Lives Matter and the requirement for a bond and the rest of that for that to curtail them? And where are the civil suits that not only go after Black Lives Matter and the Antifa folks, but their supporters and suppliers like Soros and the rest of them? Where are the guys that are suing those corporations that have donated money to Black Lives Matter? And where you have a mayor and a city council that concede blocks of a city, including people's private property, for which they are charged to protect and for which they're taking tax money. Those people, that the city of Seattle is an accessory to the destruction of the property because they have done nothing to remove those people.
Right. And in fact, they allowed them.
Where's that lawsuit?
That's what I said last week. I said that people would sue the shit out of the city council members, jointly and severally, and individually and in their official capacity, as well as the mayor, and possibly even the governor for not ordering the National Guard in there. But where are they? And people are saying, well, why? And as you and I discussed, I mentioned in my short little blurb this morning, is it possible that all the younger attorneys, that they've been indoctrinated into this nonsense and they don't understand the Constitution? They weren't taught that. It was pushed more towards a socialist agenda. And is it not that the boomers, people who are either retired, looking to retire, are the people with the wisdom and the experience and the gumption to go get this done? And I am suggesting that is the case. I am suggesting those lawyers need to step up. And I'm going to put a call out that we need to have a conference call and commence actions here. So I agree with you 100%, and I certainly know the viewers here agree 100% too. But, and on what your little synopsis was. Now let's talk about this idiot mayor, because my thinking, as I shared with you yesterday, was that you could go into civil court and go after her, demanding that she do her job, right? And you came back with a writ of mandamus. I was suggesting an order to show cause. And let's talk about that a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, well, obviously, because we've got this black-white temporary restraining order that supposedly curtails the police, but does not. And effectively, what the mayor and council have done, and maybe the sheriff as well, or the police chief, they have pulled those folks back to not, it's not just that we won't throw tear gas and the rest of that anymore. We're not even going to protect the neighborhood. We won't do anything. We're going to concede even that. Didn't they give up the police department office, one of the
precinct
offices?
Yep, allegedly they removed the stuff, weapons and evidence files and communications equipment like Stingrays, right? Those little cell tower interceptors for communications, and laptops, computers, and maybe drugs and money out of the evidence locker, because that was their headquarters, as I understand it, the primary precinct. And then they boarded it up and said, okay, well, we're going to let these guys have their police fare. So
when does a peaceful protest?
I mean, their street fair. Their street fair, not a police fair. Yeah. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
When does a peaceful protest that the judge protected from tear gas allow for or justify giving up a precinct and shutting down that entire precinct?
Good question.
And how is it that a mayor and or the police chief can say, well, we're going to hand over a $5 million building or a $10 million building. We're going to shut down all of our police activity that would normally come out of this particular office. And we are not going to contest that someone can take over our police precinct department. And here, I can see temporarily, I understand if this was Wenatchee and that was the only police department office, and in a short-term basis, it was surrounded by Antifa and they had to evacuate temporarily to get out of there. I understand boarding it up and getting out. But in the city of Seattle, you've got 500,000 people, not counting all the neighboring towns.
Right.
From Tacoma to Olympia and Bellevue, where Bill Gates lives, and the rest of these, Issaquah and Mercer Island, where Paul Allen used to live, where they could call those folks in and they could put 20,000 officers in there long enough to clean that out and to reactivate that precinct office and then round the people up.
Right.
If I went in Arizona here and 12 others and I occupied the city offices, how long would it last?
Right. Well, the point is, don't they have? Here's my argument, right? And I've been making this for a couple of weeks. The public officials take an oath to uphold the Constitution, protect, defend, and uphold, and against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They also take an oath to uphold the law. Okay. Now, this mayor seems to have breached that oath. Now, the district attorney, and the argument is that the cop in Atlanta who shot the guy was charged with 11 crimes, 11 charges, and one of which was a violation of oath. So he has the oath to uphold the law. Okay. And somehow or another, this is construed as a violation of that, which still needs to be proved in court. Now, the DA or county attorney or whoever, the city attorney, could arguably charge the mayor with this and the city council with this, or individually. Now, the question is, if they don't, because they're part of this street party group and are essentially aiding and abetting Antifa in an insurgency within the United States, can't the citizens, would we have a private right of action to compel her to either A, remove her from office and put in somebody else, or compel her to do her job and enforce the law? That was the discussion we started with yesterday, and that's what I had advertised this as saying, yes, Froggy and I are going to discuss that. I was saying we can. What do you think?
Well, I think there are lots of things that can be done, and a writ of mandamus is something, and as I say, I think these folks may be, if you simply passively say, which I don't think any town should ever do that, any city should ever do that, we're going to concede 3 blocks or 8 blocks, whatever the name is, including our precinct office.
That's a breach of their oath, period. They're out of line. They're not holding up the law.
It is. And that same thing is true in D.C. and elsewhere, where they let people take down statues.
Right.
Who is that by a majority of the people? Do we
They're
go through
destroying.
that with our-
They're destroying
you know,
public property, historical monuments. It's
Exactly.
an outrage.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an outrage. I mean, if they're ripping down the corner of a building, how is that different from the statue? And just because they don't like it doesn't give them the right to do it. And why is it that we don't have the police department in D.C., for instance, surrounding this group of people and saying, if you tear that down, we're going to arrest you for felony destruction of public property. That's just the way it is. We're going to frog march you all in for felony destruction of public property. If you want that statue removed, you're perfectly entitled to go to your representative and ask for legislation which would alter it, or
Right.
talk to the mayor of D.C. and ask him or her to petition the Congress to allow you to do it. Because in D.C., the mayor doesn't have the right to authorize it either, and nor does the mayor have the right to authorize painting all the streets with Black Lives Matter,
Right.
which they did. I mean, it's not the mayor's problem.
Right. So listen, that was a beautiful sidestep. You didn't answer my question. What about compelling this idiot mayor or getting an injunction? If they can stop the police from doing it, why don't we get an injunction or a writ of prohibition and remove her ass from office for violating the Constitution and the laws and put somebody else in? Is that doable? What do you think? What's the right attack?
Well, I mean, there's a whole several areas. One is writ of mandamus, forcing you to do what you're obligated to do, and all the arguments you've made are there to do it. Secondly, we talked about, and this goes to, I want to remind people that 3, 4, 5 years ago, whatever it was, we had the United States Supreme Court decide that gay marriage was good in all 50 states. And as I recall, there was a clerk and recorder in one of the counties, I think it was in Alabama, that said, no, I'm not doing it. And they petitioned, various parties petitioned the court.
Right. I remember that case. I remember that.
All right. So it's a writ of mandamus. And what they got was a writ of mandamus. Well, let me tie it together.
That was where? In Alabama or Arkansas?
I think it was Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas.
And the clerk refused, or what was it? The justice of the peace refused to do it.
Refused to file gay marriage applications or marriage certificates.
Right.
And the court ended up saying, you have a writ of mandamus, you have two choices. 3, you can resign from office and somebody else can take it. You can step aside, you can do it yourself, or you can step aside and let your assistant clerk do it. Because if your office does not do it, we're going to have you removed. And not only that, you'll be in violation of the order of this court. So, tell me what the difference then, when you apply that, how is that different from protecting the property of the city of Seattle from damage and destruction, intentionally withdrawing from and removing officers from an area that would protect it or activating it, and secondly, from protecting the people who live there, people and businesses that are there. So,
right.
How do you?
So then let's take it at another spin. You've got potentially irreparable harm. I think you could get grounds for an injunction, right? Irreparable harm of the fundamental rights of the citizens living in there. There you have now a group called Black Lives Matter Seattle, King County, and we had discussed that yesterday. You made the good point, and that Soros had set up his operation along the same lines as what? And it's basically terror cells, right, in different counties.
Yeah, they're terror cells. And you've got places like New York where the head of the Black Lives Matter Antifa terror cell says, we have retired black special ops guys. What did they say?
Military.
Retired covert agents, special forces guys that are training us in military conduct so that we can go out and do battle against the citizenry and the police departments of the various areas. Now, that is intentional insurrection.
Yep.
That's intentional insurrection, and it shows intent, and it's a public statement showing the intent to commit mayhem and illegal activity against both the citizenry and the police department or sheriff's department or National Guard, that we are arming and training for the sole purpose of destroying this neighborhood.
And overthrowing the government and dismantling the police department, which, if they're special forces guys, they are on permanent call to be called back up. They have violated their oath. They could be called back up and then court-martialed and imprisoned, just for the sake of argument, campers.
Yeah, well,
and by the way, so can these jackass generals running their mouth against Trump. Okay, the retired generals, they could be reactivated and then smashed in a military court. Just saying.
Yeah, see, I am not a JAG person, and I would hesitate to step clear out.
Well, I'm not going to say definite, but I mean, they'd still be entitled to a trial. They've breached their oath, right? All of them. But, you know, I'm going to go with your guys. Your guys in New York. Okay, so there you go. Now, here's my point on Black Lives Matter Seattle, right? And I'll highlight it. I still have the thing on the screen, right? It's not the national operation. The national operation has been receiving tons of cash. So why not freeze their money? Why not slap a constructive trust on there the way they just played with John Bolton? You see, the other side is doing exactly what we should be doing. You freeze frame that money, have a constructive trust. All the money in there is frozen and held to pay the damages their operation does. A, for the overtime. Let me finish. A, for the overtime of the police, for the damage to the business, and for any liability that any citizen wanted to sue on. Big chunk of money. And in addition, they could name Black Lives Matter and Seattle. You make them as co-defendants and then let the two assholes litigate against each other. This is the way I like to play. Split your forces. What, are they going to both agree that they're on the same side? Oh, good. Or are they going to fight to discover or determine who's more at liable? You see what I'm saying? You split the wedge right there. Boom. That's the way I like to think, Greg.
If in fact there are people in that Black Lives Matter in Seattle who are militant and who have intentionally advocated the overthrow of the government there or the overthrow of the area, and I think basically just declaring it as an autonomous zone is an act of violence.
It's insurrection. It's seditious. It's an insurrection.
And it basically what it says is, I will state to you right now that my intent is to violate the law, or right up front. So are they receiving money from the national organization? Who has supported and protected them? And why is it that the city of Seattle is not going after the primary perpetrators, not going after the people that have gotten on the videos and TV and said our purpose is to take this over and to hold it? That by itself is a declaration of
war,
criminal activity. Yeah, absolutely. And
we don't even need to go there. We could just say go ahead. I'll let you finish, and then I'll throw the other argument. You don't need to go that far. Go ahead.
But the additional part of it is everybody who supports them, knowing what their agenda is complicit to it and is an accessory to it.
Right.
Are the Soros organizations sending them money, or is the Soros organization sending money to the national Black Lives Matter that is funding and financing these guys?
Right.
And in either case, could they be held liable for the damage, for the conduct of the Seattle group? And the answer to that is, on the face of it, I don't know, but I sure as hell would review that.
Right.
Because
you're jumping ahead of me, man. I was going to freeze that faction and say, listen, did you get a permit for these peaceful protests? Number one.
Exactly.
Number two. Hold on. Did you provide security, and are you not responsible for controlling it and not causing damage? Right? So if you allow an infiltration, allegedly, of external forces like Antifa's, anarchists, and other groups, the Boogaloo Boys with their Hawaiian shirts, which is a whole nother group of silliness, then they're on the hook for the damage on the simple basis that they didn't get a friggin' permit. They didn't secure the perimeter. I had a guy who was a guy over at the Oppenheimer Ranch with Diamond. He was a major organizer for what the hell was the one before Black Lives Matter? I always forget the 1% group. What was that back in New York back in 2010?
Yeah, I can't remember.
You know the one I'm talking about. Yeah. And he said they would always get a permit, and if anybody came in there to get violent, everybody would stop and control them and point and scream, "Who are you with?" They would isolate, and those people would run off. Okay? So there you go. And there's none of that here. So is this not under standard course and usage? Would you say that they have an obligation to provide security? And now, if it turns to a riot under this court order, the police are entitled to use tear gas, and they're being told to direct their aggressions and restraints of rioters to the people doing the violence, which is okay. So hit them with rubber bullets.
What's this peaceful protest? I mean, let's back up. Let's go through your progression. In order to have a peaceful protest, I can guarantee you that Seattle says if you're going to have a protest, you have to file a notice for it. You've got to pay $25 or $250. You have to tell us that you have insurance against damage that's going to be done. Provide us with the insurance. You have to tell us who are going to be responsible for this, what hours this is going to be there, and you have to agree with us that you're not going to interfere with traffic or the park or whatever else.
Or damage property.
Except for where you've gotten your permit.
Right.
All right, so tell me that, does the city of Seattle acknowledge that these people got a permit? And if so, what were the terms of the permit? And once they exceeded the terms of the permit, did the Seattle city come closing down? I mean, if I have a concert, even a concert, or a political rally, let's take a political rally. Let's say that all I'm going to do is have a political rally, and I go in and I get a permit for that political rally in the park that lasts for 3 hours or 5 hours, and I agree to put a bond in to pick up the garbage and the rest of that stuff. Well, at 10 o'clock at night, when my permit runs out, there are going to be 7 police cars there, and they're going to gradually say, hey, look, you guys, your permit's up. You need to get the hell out of here. You can't be here after 10 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're going to come in and say, there's no permit here, and you have no right to keep making noise in the neighborhood. So if you continue to do that, we're going to begin to arrest you for public disturbance.
Right. Was there a curfew in place, and did the police have the right to disperse a crowd with a curfew? Absolutely.
Well, what about the COVID thing?
Forget the COVID thing. That I don't even want to go there.
If they got a permit, did the city of Seattle waive the assembly requirement? Did they waive the 6-foot requirement? Did they waive the mask requirements? Why is it that Joe Blow that's running a hardware store down the street can't open because of COVID, but these guys can have 10,000 people throwing bricks?
Right.
All demanding action.
So if we determine that these guys didn't get a permit, and in fact, the degree of infiltration, are they actually the mayhem makers, or are they actually doing peaceful protests? Then the question is, what's the link to other state or county groups of Black Lives Matter? And are they being controlled from headquarters, the national thing, in which case they can all be dragged in. Whoever's funding them can be dragged in. Their monies can be attached as well. And as you were suggesting earlier, you run that up the line all the way to Soros and his NGOs funding them, and freeze frame everything. Boom. A lot of work to get done, but I think the argument is there.
But here's the point. Let's say that 2/3 of what you and I talk about would not ultimately carry water.
All right.
Just say that.
Well, I think it would. But
the fact of the matter is that if you don't issue those kinds of resistances to this process and you don't push back, you concede to them. So we should be doing, the patriotic citizens of this country should be doing everything that Perkins Coie did on the other side.
Of course.
Everything that Black Lives Matters did on the other side. And we should be doing it in 10,000 communities. I've got a little idiot mayor here that proclaimed that everybody needs to wear masks. So The police officers are not wearing masks, but they're hired by the city. So how does that work? Are they going to write tickets up for this? It's crazy stuff.
Oh, it is. They're working in the gray area with confusion.
Yeah, well,
what are the rules? I don't know.
So we're in a democratic process where the mayor and the council must pass ordinances, and those ordinances must conform to the state and conform to the state regulations and to the federal government and to the exceptions provided by the ADA and OSHA. Where is it that a mayor on his own can issue a proclamation that requires everybody in the community to conduct themselves in a totally different way? How is that possible?
I get it. I'm looking at comments here, and here's a good question. We'll throw this at Dr.Phrog. And somebody says, that sounds like that frog guy. I guess they just came in. I don't know. What was it? I think maybe it was the heading where it said Dr.Phrog. Oh, no, it's his voice. The voice who says, well, now. All right. So listen, Dr.Phrog, Diane pops this question. This is a great little question. How can they take a place, and she's talking about Antifa or BLM, and say they aren't a part of the U.S. any longer, and then file injunctions in the courts? Interesting. But the question, wait. The question then is Black Lives Matter claiming they are occupying the Chaz zone, or is that Raz, the Razzmatazz and Chaz, and those are the Antifa, what are we calling them? I was going to say alchemists, the anarchists. So they're going to disassociate themselves from Black Lives Matter? They're the militant arm of BLM. Is that the game we're playing here? Unbelievable.
Here's her point. Her point is standing. The protesters, if they're peaceful protesters operating within the parameters of the city of Seattle, have standing. And the peaceful protesters that show up, theoretically, that show up to assemble, have a First Amendment right. When a person declares himself an insurrection, and the people that are there say that we're part of the insurrection, I don't think they have standing anymore. They don't have standing as peaceful citizens protesting the actions of the city of Seattle. And I think that's a good point. The question then is, who are the plaintiffs?
Right.
Are the plaintiffs the peaceful protesters? Are the plaintiffs the occupiers?
Well,
and the occupiers don't have standing.
Right, because they're not being stopped from protesting because the police aren't in there stopping them from protesting. They're not protesting in their little 3-block area. This is about the protest. This is an amazing little Orwellian reversal of reality for a change. The arguments made in the order where the judge goes through the description, right? Yeah. I'll pop it up on the screen again. And I'm going to take down Goulardi's comment for a second. Is basically using the analysis, as I said earlier, that we, the people, would use against them and against the government for shutting down our fundamental rights. And there's even a section in there. And I put the link up to the ACLU page in here, and you can pull it down. It's the order, okay? The legal standard, it's an extraordinary remedy, never awarded as of right. Then you've got all of this stuff, the discussion, and then he goes through the test. Likelihood of success on the merits, First Amendment claim, and then balancing, well, I forgot how he phrases it, balancing the state versus the private interest, I think. Let me see here. But this is exactly what we were talking about, and that's the whole point.
Exactly. And people, the deal about balancing the interests is this is the strict scrutiny test, is that when you start stepping on First Amendment rights, First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights, you have to show that you have an imperative, impelling.
It's the compelling state interest. The compelling state interest. Right.
That override it. And first of all, they were able to demonstrate against the peaceful protesters that tear gas did not meet the compelling state interest requirement.
Right. And what the judge used is the fact that using tear gas would chill the freedom of speech. It would have a chilling effect with people of, what was his language here, of normal, a degree of commitment. Remember the language? It was interesting. That a normal person with their degree of, I forget his language, would be pushed away. They would be turned off by this and would not return. Okay. So, I mean, it's a clever little twist here. I don't buy his reasoning, but it really fits the same argument, unbelievable. So now let me grab this other comment, because there's another one, and we should wrap this. We're about an hour, and now everybody could see how Froggy and I can go back and forth, and I've been very patient and not interrupting him, campers. But we go on for an hour and a half and like really dive into this stuff. Here's the question. Is there something can be done to stop the takeover of districts in Seattle or any other city in the U.S. before it becomes reality? I think that was the question. Well, how do you do that? You have to push back immediately. You can't let weeds grow in the garden. You got to weed the garden, as I said this morning and yesterday.
So let's look at two levels of this, okay? One level is that an active part of the citizenry says to the city council, look, my God, Black Lives Matter says they're going to be here this weekend. If you guys capitulate, you're going to have us to deal with, and you're going to like that less. And so you have to push back. You have to push back. And the second part of it is, if you haven't already looked into it, look at what the Coeur d'Alene folks did. And I'm on the edge of the
which folks?
Territory.
Who?
Coeur d'Alene, Washington. There were Black Lives. When the Black Lives stuff started in Seattle, it started spewing out, and it spewed out into Spokane. And there are videos of the Black Lives Matter folks in Spokane and the poor police officers standing on line, and these Black Lives Matter people basically in their face, against their noses,
right,
and yelling and screaming and demanding. Well, the next day they were going to move their little bus to Coeur d'Alene, which of course tells you two things. Number one is these are not local people; these are people being bussed in, people being paid $20 an hour, et cetera, and there's some evidence of that.
Right, the rent-a-mob.
They were being paid. It's all a setup. So they were going to show up in Coeur d'Alene, and by God, they were going to do the same thing in Coeur d'Alene. Well, what happened in Coeur d'Alene was about 200 or 300 guys with AR-15s and shotguns went down and policed the downtown citizens.
Right.
And they had their weaponry. And it was like, all right, guys, you're welcome to come here, but if anybody misbehaves, we're going to protect our town.
Right. And that happened in a lot of towns. Right.
And guess what? Black Lives Matter got back into their little buses. I don't know what. So let me give you another little sidelight, a little segue.
So what you're saying is the riot never happened. They ran away.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were being confronted.
Because the pushback was real. Now you get into places like Chicago where they won't let you own a firearm. And then how do you protect either your neighborhood or your community or yourself?
What do you mean they don't let you own a firearm? Did you hear, what was it, yesterday? There were like 11 shootings and deaths in Chicago with the people who don't own firearms.
Well, let's go back to pushing back. The good people in Chicago said, well, we don't necessarily agree with it, but if it's going to cut down on crime, then I guess it's okay. We'll give up our guns. And so they did. They did. And they're going to find out they wish they hadn't. But all things being considered, that's the deal. Now, when all right, so I forgot what the other. We
were talking about the bus moving from town to town.
Yeah, so part of it is that we need to recognize that this bus is being financed by somebody. And what pisses me off, even among the citizen journalists, who was it in Coeur d'Alene that followed those Black Lives, or Spokane, better yet Spokane, who followed those Black Lives Matters folks when they dispersed and watched them get into buses and vans and then followed them to the Best Western to see where they were staying and who was organizing them, and whether or not they were handing out $20 bills or $100 bills to the people that showed up. Who was it that did that?
Right.
The answer is, that I can tell, is nobody. Nobody.
What?
You know, if we don't, if
Oh, you
somebody-
mean what journalist followed him to find out?
Yeah,
Who was the investigative journalist on the scene? And there was nobody.
Exactly.
Okay.
We've got 100 protests, and as best I can tell from YouTube and elsewhere, we've got 100 protests in the country, and nobody is infiltrating. No one's doing Project Veritas. Nobody's signing up for these $20 an hour things. Nobody is exposing who's providing money for this. Nobody's exposing where these vans and buses come from. Nobody knows. You know, let's take the Spokane folks. How many of those folks live in eastern Washington or northern Idaho? My guess is it's something like 10 or 20% of them. Where did the other 80%, from where did they come? Did they come from Portland? Did they come from Salt Lake? Did they come from Minneapolis? Somebody should know. Somebody should be interviewing these folks and asking them, where do you live and how long have you been in Spokane?
Well, wait, you're talking about the protesters or the rioters?
Yeah.
Yeah, so wait a minute. It's very simple. Where's the permit?
Well, but more than that, I want to
Of
know
course.
what their permit is.
I'm being a smart ass,
I
man.
want to know what I also want to know is who's funding this and how are they doing it. Let's take the caravans that were supposedly coming up through Mexico. You know, there were a few journalists that produced evidence that those folks were not walking, that they were being paid every day, that they had a place to stay every night,
right?
That they were being transported
and
they
fed.
were being financed. They had cell phones. I was in New Mexico, and those folks, and I saw those folks. None of them looked like they'd trekked 1,000 miles.
No.
None of them.
No.
And many of them had sandals and street shoes that would not have made the 1,000-mile trip. They didn't have backpacks. Many of them showed up without water bottles. They had been fed and watered an hour before they crossed the border.
They were supported and transported. Let me ask you a quick question. All right, you were down there on the border, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep.
And here's a question. Do you know if Indian reservations that are on the border, meaning the U.S.-Mexican border, somebody had said that they don't have, that the wall, this purported wall by Trump, is not being built there and can't be built there. Do you know if that's accurate? You hear anything about that?
True. That's not true. And I can't tell you exactly what the tribal stuff has to do with it, but in the non-tribal areas, and I walked several miles of the border and looked at the various kinds of fences and the stuff that had been built and the stuff that was going to be built and the stuff that was not going to be built. The private owner that I spent time interviewing, and somebody can look at that if they want to on my video channel, where I was in Deming, New Mexico, said that when they bought the property, and you have to remember that Arizona and New Mexico were a couple of the last, I think they were the last two states or among the last, I know Arizona was one of the last states of the 48 states to become a state. And so when it was being settled, the United States government reserved an easement and a setback on all of those borders, all of that border.
Excellent.
So if you bought 1,000 acres that was on the border, that easement, that set aside, that setback was already there. That's something like 60 or 100 feet setback.
Right.
It's already there. And so,
like a utility easement, just for people out there, a utility easement, right? Where they could run a phone pole or wires across your property.
Anything it wants to.
Right.
The United States government can do anything it wants to that relates to protecting that border. Now, and for those of you who did not see that, what Trump did, I saw the 10-mile, 4 or 5 miles that he did right there south of Deming, and they put up, I don't know, 12 or 18-foot wall,
yep.
And they ran it for a couple of miles out. Then when they got to the end of it, there was a pedestrian crossing that supposedly prevented vehicle traffic that was about 12 or 18 inches tall.
12 or 18 inches, so you could step over it.
Inches tall.
Yeah.
A 5-year-old could step over it. And it was there for another 4, 5, 6 miles. And then when you got to the end of that, and I spent a bunch of time at the end of that vehicle fence,
Right.
you got to a barbed wire fence.
Yeah.
And the barbed wire fence was simply four strands of barbed wire with normal fencing. And as the rancher that I interviewed told me, much of that fence had been put in there by his grandfather 40, 50, 60 years ago. You could push it over with a quarter-ton Jeep. You could push it over with a Geo Metro.
I think you could snip the clip of barbed wire easier. Why push anything over and just go under it?
What they did is they drive up to it. They'll pull a couple staples out. They don't even cut the wire. They pull a couple staples up. They step on the wires and get them down flat on the ground, drive the car over the top of it, and twang, let the barbed wire come back up.
Huh.
And then if they have to quickly return, they drive right up to it, step on the wire, cross it, and they're back in Mexico.
Uh-huh.
But
very, very secure.
Yeah, and we're talking about, hundreds of miles. Some of the miles in New Mexico and in the corner of Arizona not only do not have barbed wire fence, they don't have any fence at all.
Excellent. All right, Greg, I got to stop you, man. Where time check is 1 hour, 10 minutes. So what's that? 70 minutes. I told you I did a couple of shows with Webb, and they were like a day apart, and they came out to 1 hour, 7 minutes and 51 seconds. The next one was 1 hour, 7 minutes and 41 seconds. And if you do the numbers on it, it's 67 minutes. At least it's not 66 minutes. We had no Masonic energy in that. It was the power of the light, I think. But listen, this is good stuff. Now, are you going to go grab yourself a webcam so we can do this, and we can we'll continue? Again, and let me ask the campers here. Put a comment. Yeah, if we could do it tomorrow, would probably be great, because we barely touched the surface on what we hit yesterday, man. And that's always the case. We go off on a tirade and shred something to pieces. And I think you did a great job explaining it in detail. But I'd like to walk through that again step by step so people can hear it, so we can push this out to lawyers so they understand how this stuff works, and they shouldn't be a bunch of spineless dipshits who are afraid to take on City Hall. Right? Right. As I'm looking into the camera. All right. So I would like very much to get a conference call with attorneys. Shoot me an email at farmerjonesnow@gmail.com and just say conference call. And we'll put it together. It'll be private with just the lawyers, and we'll do it. And Dr. Phrog will be there too if he likes. And I want to brainstorm this, because there's little local laws that are different. If you're going to go into federal court is one thing, local's another. We need to brainstorm this, because somebody's got to do it. And hey, before we wrap this, Greg, we have the deal with oh boy, Barr. And Bill still did the thing with the guy talking about his friend who left a message and did a video, and then took his video down and conveniently disappeared. And you can't prove who said it, what was his friend. Sounds just like that congressional testimony of quadruple hearsay, and we can't give you the name of the witness kind of guy. But right, that was a long sentence. What was my point?
I lost it in the middle, but yes.
Oh yeah, no, Bill still, and he had a clip in it because people objected to that. He did a follow-up, and he pulled some other guy who was evidently embedded and coming in and out of Chaz, but he wasn't there. I think he was out before the stupidity started. And even the language, if you watch Still's video, the guy, the investigative journalist undercover, was saying it's reported that this happened, that happened, the other. He didn't say, I saw it, I witnessed, people told me. It's reported that. Can we get more friggin' nebulous? It's the same line of crap. It's like this little punk that was down here, a local news station. It was about 4 miles down on the first night of the happy worldwide riots going into West Palm. And this guy is 2-3 blocks away outside a parking lot of a shopping mall with a dramatic camera scene of 4 police cars behind him, the cops out of the cars standing around, waiting for their donuts, no doubt, but the lights are on, the flashing lights, and this guy's talking about what happened at the Best Buy. Now, if you get up on your tippy toes, you can see the Best Buy over there, but he's talking about how a car was burned, and he shows a picture of a Geek Squad van that was in that parking lot. A van like this was burned over there, and the windows were broke. You know, he didn't have any firsthand knowledge. It was like real crap, and I think that's the same kind of lame-ass reporting this other guy did, not a real war journalist, if you know what I mean. So I find that whole discussion very suspect, kind of off point, you know, but I don't buy it. I think it's another manipulation to trigger emotional response and get the military called in to try and violate something. I don't know. There's many, many layers being played here, man. And Barr appears on Maria Bartiromo he uses the clip. And I'll find that link and I'll put it in here if I can. And she says, she says, what are you going to do about this? And he says, well, this is really the responsibility of the local government and the state's government. So he passes the buck. And he says, now, of course, if there are federal laws being violated, then the Department of Justice will have to act. Really.
Yeah, but it won't. You know, I have, in case anybody's interested, on Seething Frog channel, I have a couple of videos about William Barr and his background. And I basically said at the time, I guarantee you, he is not going to do any of the crap that Q says he's going to do. He's not going to do any of the things that all of the Trump supporters say he's going to do.
Right.
He's not going to arrest Hillary or go after his good, personal, long-time friend, Jim Comey.
Or Bob Mueller. Or Bob Mueller.
And Mueller, yeah, who was a personal long-time friend. Maybe that Mueller's the...
Yeah, and the wives supposedly go to church and they do their thing. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and send me the links to them. But the two favorite videos you have that are amazing. The one is it's a giant psyop. That was great, disturbing but great. And the other one was the body double of Hillary. That was friggin' brilliant. And the viewers here need to know that Froggy not only is an attorney, but he is also an artist and a sculptor, and has a very multifaceted interest in life. And we can talk more about that in the time you taught law in Washington State. Imagine that.
Well, not only did I teach law at the University of Washington, well, I was in the business school, but just to let you know, I taught it for several years there. But the house that I lived in was on North Capitol Hill, and I checked the other day, and it is 2.6 miles from the park that's been taken over by the Antifa Black Lives Matter guys. I know that area. I lived in that general area for 12 years. I can drive right to that park, and I can tell you where the International District is south of there, and where the Capitol Hill area is north of there, and the rest of that. I know exactly where this stuff is. So
right. So you know the area, man. So that's great. So we have to definitely continue this, or try to do it over, and maybe we'll get our technology working. But I'm not taking the blame on this. I screwed up big time with Web the other day. So this is your end. Somebody stole your camera. We'll blame a third party. That's it.
No, it's all my fault.
All right.
All my fault.
Good deal. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you so much. If you want, email me those links and I'll put them in here to those videos you want people to see. And all right, man. I'm going to hang up. Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll speak soon.
See you later.
Bye now.
Yeah.
All right, campers. That was the best we could do on Ghetto TV. I've got the link in here. I'm also putting the link to the Patreon account, which I still haven't gotten to try a live stream on, and the PayPal account. And if you like this kind of real discussion, not the pablumized, what should we call it, filter discussion, then consider subscribing to this channel. Tell a friend. And this is the backup channel, and I want to make sure this is up and running, because you never know. We might be a little too, shall we say, controversial or truthful for the censors. So I would appreciate your support, and we need to support, and I do as well, independent media and other journalists out there to keep everybody going. Kind of, as I said last time, what do you want to say? Like an econosphere that like the foundations do. They move their money around tax-free. Well, this won't be tax-free, but at least it'll keep it in the same sphere so we can keep being up and running and keeping the real info and thinking live. All right, campers, let me take a quick look. Yes, tattered playlist. Stewie. All right, and good. All right, well, thank you all, campers. I'm going to end the broadcast. Went longer than I wanted, but I enjoyed it. Hope you did too. I can't wait to hear what it sounds like. We'll get him his webcam. All right, thank you now, campers. Bye for now.